Attention. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. You may be seated, giving praise and honor to Jehovah God, who is the creator of the heavens and the earth. For we thank him for all that he has done for us, everything that he is doing for us, and everything that he will do for us. We acknowledge him as, once again, the creator of the heavens and the earth. For in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And as we open up the Holy Scriptures, as we should do daily, opening up what is known as the Old Testament, which is where the Word of God is contained. We'll be all reading through, once again, from Genesis all the way, as we just mentioned, as we continue reading on all throughout the entire Holy Scriptures. And this book that we are in right now, the book of Nehemiah, as his name is pronounced in Hebrew, there's a lot that we can learn from this, a lot that can be extracted from this. As once again, to begin, we were introduced last week to Nehemiah, who was the cupbearer of Artaxerxes I. And it mentioned that in the 20th year of Artaxerxes I, that Nehemiah inquired about the welfare of the children of Yisrael that dwelt in the territory of Judah. And the information that he received caused them to become sad, because he heard about how, once again, he's the cupbearer of the king of Persia, and Persia at that time, the Persian Empire encompassed, as we read in the book of Esther, 127 provinces, going from, including Egypt. If you think about what they call today the Middle East, all of that was controlled by the Empire of Persia at this time, following after the Medes, who followed after Babylon. And once again, the king of Persia, he ruled over all of this territory, what is known today as the Middle East. And him being an Israelite and so concerned with his people, those that were around him that knew about what was happening in Jerusalem, because we know from the book of Ezra, which precedes this book, and there was a time where, based on the canon, that the books of Ezra and Nehemiah were actually one book. But in the canon that we have today, most of it is separated into two books, Ezra and Nehemiah. Just like Chronicles was one book, but you have First Chronicles, Second Chronicles. Just like Samuel was one book, you have First Samuel, Second Samuel. Just like Kings was one book, but today you have First Kings, Second Kings. So now as we get to the book of Nehemiah, and he inquired after what was happening with those that returned, because after, once again, reading through the book of Ezra, it starts off talking about in the book of Ezra during the time of King Cyrus, and how he gave the edict that the children of Israel can return back to Jerusalem, and there were many that went back into Jerusalem in order to rebuild the house of God. And then there were many, of course, that did not go back. There were many that was spread throughout the earth at that time. And throughout the process of time, the house of God was rebuilt, but the walls of the city of Jerusalem were not rebuilt, and they would still look like they were burnt with the fire for when Babylon went in there in the time of King Nebuchadnezzar and went in there to burn down Jerusalem, burn down the house of God. And it saddened Nehemiah to hear this, and he desired to go forth into Jerusalem to be the spearhead of the process of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. So he prayed to God first, and that was the message that we all learned from last week in reading in this book, that pray to God first in every endeavor that you may have. Anything that you feel that is within your mind to do, pray to God first. And he prayed to God, and 4 months later, the king Artaxerxes saw that Nehemiah wasn't looking too good. He asked him, what's wrong with you? Because he said, you're not looking your cheerful self that you normally look on any other day. And before he answered the king, what did he do at that time? He prayed. And we don't read the prayer. We read the prayer that he made when he heard about what happened in Jerusalem, but we don't read the prayer that he said to the Most High when the king asked him. But that's the message that we learned also, that, and it was said this morning, that You know, your supervisor doesn't really give you anything. Your manager doesn't really give you anything. Nobody really gives anything. That is the Most High that really gives you everything. So you always have the Most High in mind with everything that you do. So even if you appear before a teacher, professor, supervisor, manager, anybody on earth, and they ask you, what is your request? You make your petition to the Most High first before you answer that individual, even if it's a 1-second prayer. Moses has one of the shortest prayers in the Holy Scriptures when he prayed on behalf of his sister, Miriam. He just said, Jehovah heal her, as it is translated in English. But it was a short prayer, and the Most High heard Moses' prayer. So our prayers to the Most High don't have to be long to be heard. But you want to be heard, and it's your actions before, during, and after the prayer that really counts. So Nehemiah, because his mind was on Jerusalem and seeing the city being rebuilt, the walls beautified once again, that would instill pride for the children of Israel, he prayed, and he received the answer from the king Artaxerxes, who said, you can go and do this. You know, Nehemiah asked for letters, basically, you know, permission as he's traveling from Shushan, which is the capital, or Susa. You know, if you do the research today, Susa, the capital of, or was the capital of the Persian Empire. He asked for what we know today as license or permits as he's traveling from Susa to go down to Jerusalem. And he makes it into Jerusalem. He gets there and he inspects the walls of the city. He didn't do it by telling everybody what he came there to do. He did the inspection on his own. And then once he got there, he did the inspection, saw what needed to be done. Then he told the people what he was there to do. But he had some, as we found the words last week, antagonists, haters, ops, Sanballat, and Tobiah. Sanballat being a Moabite based on, just cross-reference, and Tobiah is an Ammonite, as it says directly in the scripture. So he had an Ammonite antagonist and a Moabite antagonist. But as we read throughout the book of Nehemiah, we're going to see why they were the antagonists, and we're going to also see how important Sanballat and Tobiah were actually to the children of Israel. Not necessarily in a good way, but we're going to see why these two names pop up so much in the book of Nehemiah. But they are antagonists all throughout the book of Nehemiah, but we're going to see their character and also what their place was for the children of Israel, which caused them to become an antagonist. And once again, it wasn't necessarily in a good way. So these two names, once again, continue to pop up as the children of Israel, as we read last week, the walls of Jerusalem, they proceeded to build it. We got a record of everybody not necessarily everybody, we got a record of those who put their hands in to do the work. We got a long list of names, so record keeping was something that was very important. When we get to the book of Chronicles, we're going to see that just because there's a lot of names, it's because record keeping was very important. Record keeping is important to any society. It's important to any community. So definitely it's important to every congregation to know who is within your congregation, who's there, who they're married to, who their children are. Record keeping is something that's very important. Once you become loose with your records, you don't know who's who. And then that's why when your children grow up later on and they're trying to figure out, they look up pictures, well, who's that? Well, you don't know who that is. Or who's that? And where did this come from? Or how did this start? Because there's not enough record keeping. Congregations come up and go down, but nobody keeps records to know, well, this was the person that instituted this congregation. And it was with these people, these men and women. And then these men and women, they had these children. And that's how you keep legacy going. Legacy is recorded. Because if you just go by oral history and just people just saying something, it could change from generation to generation. But once everything is recorded, then it's definitely there. So that's why it was important that everybody, or once again, not everybody, the people that had their hands to do the work of building the walls, their names were recorded. And it wasn't recorded for the purpose of the book Nehemiah. It was just recorded, period. So by the time the book of Nehemiah was put together, these names were already there. So the walls of Jerusalem, the process started. We read about that process starting last week in chapter 3, and we're going to continue reading on how that process continued. And then in the weeks to come, we'll see how that process of the walls of Jerusalem ending. But we're going to once again read about Sanballat and Tobiah a lot throughout the book of Nehemiah. So once again, that's just a recap of where we started from in the book of Nehemiah to get to the point where we are now, where Nehemiah is also, he went from being cupbearer to the king Artaxerxes to being now governor of the province of Judah. And we don't, you can think in your mind, is that a step up or a step down? You can, we can debate that all day. Because once again, he's not a governor of an entire province, but he was the cupbearer of the king of an entire empire. So you can weigh it up whichever one you want to, which one you prefer to be. But being a cupbearer of the king of the empire caused him to be the one that was able to go down and eventually be the governor of the province in order to continue, and complete that rebuilding process of the walls of Jerusalem. But we know during the time of Zerubbabel, who was out of the lineage of King David, as we read in the book of Ezra, but he was not named king of Judah. And Nehemiah is a Judite, but even with him being a Judite, and we don't have his, we're going to see his genealogy later on, pretty much in the book of Chronicles. But what would be one reason why there was no king in Judah during this time? Even if people were able to track their genealogy from King David on down. Why wasn't anybody in the lineage of King David named king of Judah? Not king of Israel, because we know the nation was already split into two kingdoms. The northern kingdom was taken into captivity, and the northern kingdom, their territory was re-inhabited by the Assyrians and the Moabites and Ammonites, which sort of connects with Sanballat and Tobiah, why they're mentioned throughout. But why wasn't, when on the return of Israel coming out of the Babylonian captivity during the time of the Persian Empire, why wasn't Zerubbabel just named king of Judah, being that he was literally out of the line of David and could easily have been crowned king?
Disrespectful to the emperor.
Yes. Yeah, so he got the answer. He had the answer, but I don't know if you heard him, but I hear your answer. He said, like I said, it's disrespectful to the emperor or the king Artaxerxes. It's just like, think about this country. You have the president of the United States. You don't have a president of a state. You have a governor of a state. It would be disrespectful to have a president under another president in terms of a government structure. Even in a corporation, you may have a president of a certain operation, but then you have the CEO who's over the entire organization. But if there's a president, if they have a president over the entire organization, you really wouldn't see a president of an operation. They would just have a different title, director or something like that. So you had governors over these 127 provinces because you already had a king over the entire empire. So even though these provinces had their own kings in times past when they were not part of this empire, it would be disrespectful to, and we're going to read about that actually as one of the reasons. And that was one of the reasons why it was mentioned in the time of Ezra, when the antagonists there wanted to stop the building of the house of God because they told the king they're going to set up their own king. You don't have on earth, you don't have a king under a king. Right. It's just like today you have countries that have prime ministers, they don't have presidents. There's a reason why certain countries don't have presidents, they only have prime ministers, because it's actually, even though you vote for a prime minister in those countries, there is still somebody above the prime minister, which is the Queen of England. So because the Queen of England is over those countries constitutionally, those countries cannot have a president. They would have a prime minister, once again, even though the people actually vote for them. But the Queen of England could actually, if she wanted to, take out any of those prime ministers constitutionally if she wanted to. She just never does because it doesn't look right. But when you have a constitutional monarchy, the Queen of England could actually, so if any of the Caribbean countries that are part of that constitutional monarchy wanted to, she could say, no, I don't want that prime minister. This is who I want.
What is their independence that they celebrate?
It's technically not an independence. It's a separation. It's a separation, and just to include that Canada is actually a part of that, but it's a separation of, it's a level of autonomy. That's really what it is. So when those countries are celebrating independence, they're celebrating a level of autonomy. But it's technically, as Chief Mekobadi has mentioned, it's not literally an independence because you still have the Queen of England over you, who can at any time veto anything that is done within those countries. That's why when Barbados removed themselves from the Queen, that's actual independence that took place, where they actually did that the year before. So we're going into the book of Nehemiah. So once again, these political structures may seem like they're not tanakhical, just to make up a word, because people wonder why we're talking about political structures, but those political structures stem from what we read here and just continue to go on. Just like religious structures that exist in the world today, we see a lot of those things in the Tanakh, because God already told us don't worship the false gods, but these are the gods that people were worshiping then that they continue to worship now, even though they just changed the names and changed the languages. So we're going into the book of Nehemiah, starting with chapter 4.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
But it came to pass that Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabians and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the repairing of the walls of Jerusalem went forward, and that the breaches began to be stopped, and they were very wroth, and they conspired all of them together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion therein.
So once again, we speak, why would progress make somebody else upset? Why would, they're not Israelites. They don't, Nehemiah told them, we read that in chapter 2. He told them, you have no stake in this. We're going to do this. You have nothing to, because the first thing they tried to do was mock them. They said, why you want to rebuild the walls? They mocked them. And they said, Nehemiah said, you have nothing to do. We're going to do this anyway. So usually when you have those haters, ops, antagonists, the first thing they may try to do is mock you in order to stop you from progress. Once again, we defined the word progress last week, because once again, in order to get progress, it starts with you first. And once you get over yourself and you realize that the Most High is with you, then go forth with the work and don't let anybody stop you. But they're going to stop you by trying to mock you. Just like you living in this way of life, you may not have been born in this way of life, and you changed, you learned about this way of life. The people that you thought were your friends, they're going to be your antagonists. Well, why are you doing that? Well, why are you wearing those fringes? Right. Why you can't hang out with us on Friday night? Why you can't do this on, Saturday during the day? Why you got to eat like that? Right. And they mock you in order to stop you from doing the things that you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. The thing that that the Most High placed within you to do, they want to mock you in order to deter you from doing that. So that's what they tried first. When the mocking didn't work, now they want to start making threats. That becomes the next level, because they're saying that they became angry. But once again, when we continue reading through the book of Nehemiah, we're going to see how much position Sanballat and Tobiah had. And you would just think also Tobiah, he's an Ammonite, but he had the name Tobiah, which means Yah is good. Right. Also a connection that we'll see later on as well. But why would they be angry that the Israelites are rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem? Once again, these are things to think about as we read in the book of Nehemiah. And they became so angry that they started to make threats. But this is what Nehemiah did in response to that.
Verse 3. But we made our prayer unto our God, and set a watch against them day and night because of them. And Yehuda said, the strength of the bearers of the burden is decayed, and there is much rubbish, so that we are not able to build the wall. So,
and before we get to that part, but the first thing that Nehemiah did when he heard about the threats was pray. That's right. This is a recurring theme. Pray first. Somebody threatens you, pray first, then you defend yourself. That's right. That's what we're going to see here. We're going to see they didn't just pray and did nothing. It's not like they prayed and said, God is just going to, we know God will handle everything. But you have, as a human being, you still have to be utilized by God to do those things. Right. So he received the threat and he prayed first. He didn't just say, well, I heard the threat, we're going to get our weapons and we're going to attack. They depended on the Most High first. In order to depend on the Most High, you pray. Nehemiah did the right steps all along, and these are the things that we should learn from, and this is probably why he was so successful in his life. Probably why he became the cupbearer of the king anyway. Because he realized who he was, he realized who his God is, and he realized the connection between God and himself. And everything that we see that he did, he prayed first. So he heard the threat, he prayed, and then he had everybody defend themselves. set up things in order to protect themselves. But Judah was saying, and this is the Judites, they're saying that there's a lot, because they're looking at the walls because the construction had already been started. But they're saying this is just too much for us. There's too much damage to the walls, and and that's not everybody, but some of their minds, they're thinking that the work is just going to be too much for them. Continue.
Verse 5. And our adversary said, they shall not know, neither see, till we come into the midst of them, and slay them, and cause the work to cease. And it came to pass, that when the Judites that dwelt by them came, they said unto them 10 times, Ye must return unto us from all the places. Therefore set I the lowest part of the space behind the wall, in the open place I even set the people after their families, with their swords and spears and their bows. And I looked, and rose up and said unto the nobles, and to the rulers, and to the rest of the people, Be ye not afraid of them. Remember Yahweh, who is great and awful, and fight for you. Yahweh, who is great and awful, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses.
So what Nehemiah told the Judites is that don't worry about them. The Most High is going to protect us. But you still have to defend yourself, because what's really happening is, what really came out of the first thing they said is that there's too much rubbish, we're not going to be able to rebuild the walls. But really what happened is what they said after that our enemies are saying all these things about us, so they were afraid to rebuild the walls, knowing that at any point in time that Sanballat, Tobiah, and all of these Ammonites and Ashdodites, and which are the Philistines, and all of these people from various sections are going to come and attack. But Nehemiah said, don't worry about them. He's telling them that Yahweh is going to be on our side. And if there's going to be a fight, that you're fighting for your wives, your sons, and your daughters. Right. You have a reason to fight. Right. Don't be afraid of them, because if you just become afraid, then they're going to come in and take over. And then what's going to happen to your family? Right. If you don't stand up and fight for your family now, what's going to happen to them when you're not here? Exactly. So he's saying that beyond that, we are the chosen people of the creator of the heavens and the earth. And once you walk with that in the streets every day, then there's no one that can stop you. The same one that, once again, spoke in the beginning, let there be light, and there was light. There were no human beings at that time. Right. And he chose Abraham, our father, Yitzchak, our father, Yaakov, our father, whose name was changed to Yisrael. So if you know that you are a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you know that the Most High is with you, there's nothing that can stop you. The same God that stopped the sun and the moon for Yehoshua when he was fighting against the Canaanites. Right. The same God that when Daniel went into the lion's den, he closed the mouths up. Right. The same God that many things that we consider miracles, right, Jehovah God did on behalf of the children of Yisrael. So if you're Yisrael, there's nothing to worry about. But you have to be right. So there's a lot of things that was said this morning. You have to be right. You have to do the commandments, statutes, and judgments of the Most High. You can't just say, well, you're Yisrael, God is going to protect me, and you profane the Sabbath day. You can't say that I'm a child of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and God is going to protect me, and you don't wear your fringes. You can't say that I'm a child of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God is going to protect me, and you're eating in places that are unclean. What? You have to make sure that you are doing your part. A covenant is an agreement between two or more parties. So you can't expect God to keep up his end of the covenant, and you're not. So Nehemiah is known, he's banking on his righteousness and the righteousness of the people that are with him, and he's saying, don't be afraid of them. Because those people are not supposed to be in, as we read later in the book of Deuteronomy, they're not even supposed to be around. Basically, that's what it said. They're not even supposed to be around. Right. Not dead, they're just not supposed to be around. Okay. Even to the 10th generation, they're just not supposed to be around. Mm-hmm. The Moabites and Ammonites, because once again, the Moabites didn't treat us nicely when we tried to pass through. And the Ammonites, the same thing, and they hired out Balak the Moabites hired out Balak to try to curse Israel. So they're not even supposed to be around. So don't worry about them, because they're already enemies to the God that created the heavens and the earth. So all you have to do is be on the side of God. That's it. And that's what Nehemiah is saying. And even beyond that, even along with that, not beyond, along with that, you're fighting for your family. So don't worry about anything. Continue.
Verse 9. And it came to pass when our enemies heard that it was known unto us, and God had brought us their counsels to naught, that we returned all of us to the wall, every one to his work. And it came to pass from that time forth that half of my servants wrought in the work, and half of them held spears, the shields, and the bow, and the coats of mail. And the rulers were behind all the house of Yehuda.
So they made those threats. They didn't think that Nehemiah and everybody would hear about those threats. They thought that they would have made a surprise attack, but then they realized that God revealed the counsel to the children of Israel, and then the children of Israel defended themselves. So once again, also, don't let words get you in trouble.
Say what?
You're going to protect yourself. If you hear somebody threatening you, I'm talking about it from afar, not talking about like right in front of you. I'm talking about somebody threatening you from afar. You don't have to chase after every threat that's made after you. Pray to God and just set up a defense for yourself, so if anything happens, you'll be ready. But you don't have to just hear, oh, somebody over there says, we got to pick up and fight. You don't have to pick up and fight because of words. Don't let words get you in trouble.
That's right.
People just talk. They were just talking. And then once they saw that the word went out and the children of Israel were defending themselves, everything went out the window. But they're still going to defend themselves. So he had a portion of people that are going to stay working on the wall. Then he had a portion of people that are going to be looking out in case anything happens. Continue.
They that built the wall, and they that bore the burdens laden themselves, everyone with one of his hands wrought in the work, and with the other held his weapon. And the builders, everyone had his sword girded by his side, and so building. And he that sounded the horn was by me.
So they didn't let anything stop them. They didn't let words stop them. So once again, the mock came first. That didn't work. The threat came after. That didn't work. But they still had to build a wall and know that at any point in time, there could be an attack. So as it said here, they had people that were just working on the walls. Then they had the people that were just there for defense. But even the people that were working on the walls had their work tools and a weapon on them anyway.
Yep.
That's like, today you had a carpenter. He has his tape measure on one side and a gun on the other side. So his tool belt had, the knife and the gun on it. That's how they were working. Because if anything happened, they were ready to defend themselves. So that's how they defend. But the work had to continue on. Once again, we spoke about that word progress. Don't let anything stop that progress. Pray to God and make sure that you continue on with that progress, and don't let anything stop you. But just be ready if anything happens, but don't let anything stop that progress. So even with all of that, then they had somebody that was going to sound a horn in case anything happens. Continue.
13. And I said unto the nobles and to the rulers and to the rest of the people, the work is great and large, and we are separated upon the wall one from another. In what place soever ye hear the sound of the horn, resort ye thither unto us. Our God will fight for us.
So what he's saying is that the city of Jerusalem is so large. So the people are spread out in separate sections, not like they're all building in one section at a time. They're all working on the walls all around the city. So he's saying that wherever you hear the sound of the horn, that means that there's an attack coming from that direction. Everybody pick up and go to that section where you hear the horn. But don't let the work stop. So everybody's going to continue all around the wall. Even if it's a mile long by a mile long, everybody's going to, but you're going to still hear that horn even if you're a mile away. So he had people stationed in order to sound out alarm. Continue.
So he wrought in the work, and half of them held spears from the rising of the morning until the stars appeared. Likewise, at the same time I said unto the people, that everyone with his servant lodged within Jerusalem, that in the night they may be a guard unto us, and may labor in the day. So neither I, nor my brethren, nor my servants, nor the men of the guard that followed me, none of us put off our clothes. Everyone that went to the water had his weapon.
So even when they had to wash, even if they had to do anything secular, they had their weapons ready. Because once again, the threat was so strong that they had to make sure that they were able to defend themselves. But he had people working from, as I said, from morning until evening. And then he had people defending the city still from morning to evening. But at nighttime, he told people, even those that lived outside of Jerusalem and just came in for the work, he said, this is not a time to go back home at night.
Right.
He said, just stay in the city and we're going to take care of your food and all that stuff. So they had to make sure that they defended themselves. But as we read in the book of Nehemiah, there was actually never any actual war that took place. These were just words that came forth. So don't let anybody's words stop you from doing what you got to do.
Message.
And that's just all throughout. So once again, and you don't have to, as we just said, don't chase every threat. Because if you chase every threat, you're going to be fighting all the time. And you don't want to spend your life just being known as somebody that just wants to fight everybody. Because once again, everybody is just talking and they're not going to really do anything. Sanballat and Tobiah, they were just talking because they were upset at the progress that's being made. So sometimes when you're doing good, people are going to be upset that you're doing good, and they're going to make threats in order to stop you, but they're not really actually going to do anything. Once you continue working, they're going to give up. When they see you working and you have plans in place to defend yourselves, they're definitely not going to do anything. But also, as we mentioned, that the first people or the first individual or the first thing that can stop you from progress is you. And that's what we're going to read in this chapter right here. Chapter 5.
Then there arose a great cry out of the people and of their wives and against their brethren the Judites. For they was said that we, our sons and our daughters are many. Let us get from the corn, that we may eat and live. Some also there were that said, we are mortgaging our fields and our vineyards and our houses. Let us get corn because of the dearth. There were also those that said, we have borrowed money for the king's tribute upon our fields and our vineyards. Yet now our flesh is as the flesh of our brethren, our children as their children, and lo, we bring into bondage our sons and our daughters to be servants, and some of our daughters are brought into bondage already. Neither is it in our power to help it, for other men have our fields and our vineyards.
And we're going to find out who these men are that have their fields and their vineyards. But what is happening at this time is that the people are saying that they don't have any food. And the reason, and they don't have anything to buy food with. Because they're saying, and this is from time past, from the time they got into Jerusalem, or into the territory of Judah, from the time we read in Ezra, that throughout a period of time, when they talk about the dearth, there were famines that happened during that time. There were times where they needed that food. So the corn that they're talking about is actually the grain. They needed that food in order to survive. So what they were doing was selling their houses, and then they were selling their lands, then they were selling themselves. Something that was so similar in the book of Genesis when, during the time of the 7 years of famine, that the Egyptians were selling everything to the king or to the Pharaoh because they started running out of money. So Joseph, who was in charge of all of the food at that time, in the time of Genesis, and we read about it in Egypt, the Egyptians were saying that at a point in time, we have nothing. You already bought our houses from us. Or we wouldn't know. They said, we sold our houses to you. We sold our land. All we have is ourselves. We sold ourselves unto you at the time. So that's how the Pharaoh became the controller of the Egyptian people. Right. So what the Judites are saying here is that they don't even own their own houses anymore. They don't have their own fields anymore because they had to sell their properties and even their daughters into servitude in order to eat. But we know in the year of Jubilee, you would get all those things back. Right. But they're saying that in order for us to complete this work, we need strength. To get strength, we have to eat. And we have to make sure that everybody wants to make sure that these walls are rebuilt, but they're thinking about their families. You don't want to go home after a day's work and still have nothing to feed your family with. And that's what they're saying here, is that we've sold and we don't have anything. And the king's tribute is because the king, who's king of Persia, is over everybody, there has to be taxes paid. So they said that we sold everything to pay taxes. We sold our land just to eat. But we're going to see who they sold these houses, lands, and themselves to. Continue.
Verse 6. And I was very angry when I heard their cry and these words. And I consulted with myself and contended with the nobles and the rulers and said unto them, ye lend upon pledge every one to his brother. And I held a great assembly against them. And I said unto them, we after our ability have redeemed our brethren the Judites and sold them sold themselves unto the heathens. And would ye nevertheless sell your brethren, and should they sell themselves unto us?
So the people that did a lot of the buying, that owned a lot of the houses and the properties and the servants, were the nobles and the rulers. Oh. These were the princes of Judah and Binyamin and the other tribes of these are the nobles. Some of them had already sold themselves to the other nations, but a lot of them sold. That's how a lot of the nobles get richer. So if you think about it, once again, the king of Persia, he's the president. Then you have a governor over the provinces. But within the provinces, you would have what is known as city council.
Right.
So the city council is the one, that is buying up all of these houses. Now the people are suffering because they have nothing else to sell in order to get food. So Nehemiah is upset with the city council because he's saying that you're gonna own the people and still not take care of them at the same time. It's one thing you bought their property, but you're not taking care of the people. So if you're not going to take care of the people, then the people are not going to be able to have the strength or have the desire to build the walls. So we already have a problem with the enemies outside trying to attack us and threaten us. Now we're harming ourselves by oppressing one another. So that's why Nehemiah had to take counsel and say that, are you going to continue doing this? Just using the term city council to bring it up to date.
Right.
But once again, these are the nobles that were over the people, which are the same people. And Jehovah God said in Leviticus chapter 25 that we're not supposed to treat each other like bondmen and bondwomen.
Right. Feed them.
And that's what they were doing here. They bought the houses and the properties and still didn't take care of the people. Continue.
Verse 8. Still got verse 9. Also I said, the thing that ye do is not good. Ought ye not to walk in the fear of Yahweh our God, because of the reproach of the heathen, our enemies? And I likewise, and my brethren and my servants, have lent them money and corn. I pray you, let us leave off this exaction.
So he's saying, Nehemiah is saying that me and my people, my servants, my people, we're going to lend them the money, but don't keep oppressing them. Let them get their stuff back. At least let them have some comfort that they can have a house to go to. But there's still a process of lending that's taking place. And when of course, when you lend, you expect to get the money back. But Nehemiah is probably not even worried about that. But he's giving them the money as a loan. But he's saying they got to live somehow, and he's gonna make them make an agreement. Continue.
11. Restore, I pray you, them, even this day, their fields and their vineyards and their olive yards and their houses also, the 100 pieces of silver and the corn and the wine and the oil that ye exact of them.
So these nobles were making a lot of money. Yeah. They had the houses, they had the vineyards, they had the olive yards, and they also had 100 pieces of silver. Now you think about what 100 pieces of silver is, and think about it in terms of when we read about the dowry is like 50 shekels. We read about in the book of Judges that the priest that was hired, they were going to pay him 10 pieces of silver a year.
Right.
So if you think about a yearly salary is comparison to 10 pieces of silver. Now you talk about 10 into 100. You talk about 10 years worth of money, and this is what the people were given individually, or what they were promising to give to these city council people, along with taking all of their property. So Nehemiah said, give them back everything. We're gonna start fresh. We're gonna act like this is the year of Jubilee. We're gonna start fresh because we have too many problems. We're already worried about what the heathens are coming up to us with. Right. Just return everybody their stuff. Let's start over fresh. Don't oppress the people like that. And that's what the princes and the nobles, the rulers, that's what they were doing to the people while Nehemiah was away. This was all the things that were happening during that time when the children of Israel went back into Jerusalem, all of these years, even during the time when Ezra went there, even all of the 13 years before that, up until this time, you had the rulers oppressing the people financially, taking their stuff and not taking care of them at the same time, to where they're starving and all the rulers are eating off of what the people, as it was mentioned this morning, you have people in churches and various religious organizations that are just living off of the people, but not taking care of the people. It's one thing if you're going to take money from the people, but still make sure the people are taken care of. And that's what Nehemiah is saying, because Nehemiah is saying you have to fear God at this point. You can't look at your people in a downtrodden state like that and think it's okay. Because all of this work that we're doing to rebuild the walls would be in vain, because somebody else would just come and just tear down these walls, because we are oppressing each other. And if we are continuing to oppress each other, God is going to cause other people to come in and oppress us. We already have safety from our enemies because we're defending ourselves. Let us not do the harm to one another.
Message. That's
That's what Nehemiah is saying this time. Don't let us harm one another, because all this outside stuff, we got that now. Nehemiah, he probably prayed, but he said he took counsel, but we don't read because it was so traumatizing that Israel was doing this to Israel.
Right.
Nehemiah couldn't even pray about this. Because because this is sin at this point. He couldn't even pray at this point. He said, I got to fix this first, then we're going to pray. Outside stuff, I could pray about that stuff because I'm righteous. I know my people are righteous. Right. Inside stuff, I can't really pray about this right now because we just doing wrong. Continue.
Verse 12. Then said they, we will restore them, and we will require nothing of them. So we will do even as thou sayest. Then I called the Kohanim and took an oath of them, and they should do according to this promise. Also I shook out my lap and said, so God shake out every man from his house and from his labor that performs not this promise.
And this was just a sign. He just shook his garment. He did this in front of everybody. And he said, just like I'm doing this to my garment, let God do to you if you don't follow this agreement that we're doing right here. Sometimes we have to, and it's hard to do so living in certain countries, but sometimes we have to give judges certain authority that they need to have. Sometimes we have to give leadership certain authority that they need to have in order for this nation to move forward. So everybody might not have wanted to agree with this, but once he involved the priesthood and he made an oath with the priesthood,
It's official.
and he's the governor of the province, it's official. You just have to roll with it or not. It's just like we read in the time of Ezra. They called a meeting. They said, if you're not here in 3 days, we taking your house.
Yeah.
And your fields. That's just what it is. We have to learn to give certain respect to judges and people of authority today in order for this nation to thrive and survive. Once again, it's difficult to do that here because everybody feels that, I bought the house myself, I bought this myself, and you're working for somebody else, and somebody else is paying you, so you don't have to listen to somebody that's not paying you. Right. So that's causes the problems. But if we want to be a quote-unquote autonomous nation, we have to learn to do things in an autonomous manner and give respect and honor to people in certain positions in order to move forward. So once again, everybody wasn't down with this, but the edict was already there, and they just had to follow it. All of these rulers that may not have wanted to give the stuff back had to give this stuff back. Continue.
Even thus be he shaken out and empty. And all the congregation said, Amen, and promised Yahweh. And praised Yahweh. And all the people did according to this promise. Moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Yehuda, from the 20th year even unto the 32nd year of Artaxerxes the king, that is 12 years, I and my brethren have not eaten the bread of the governor.
So we're not going to read about the construction of the completion of the wall. You can read, of course, on your own. Today, we're not going to read about the completion, but the book of Nehemiah actually takes the span of 12 years. And we're going to read where Nehemiah actually goes back to King Artaxerxes and then comes back to remember, when he made that promise to the king and the king gave him leave to go, the king asked him, when are you going to come back? Right. And he said, I set a time. We don't read the time that was set, but we know that Nehemiah eventually goes back to become the cupbearer of the king. But then when he comes back to Judah some years later, people were doing all types of stuff that he had to fix at that time. But this book takes the span of 12 years. But it didn't take 12 years to build a wall. We're going to see, once you continue reading on the chapters, how fast it took once everybody got together to rebuild the walls. Continue.
But the foremen of governors that were before me laid burdens upon the people, and took of them for bread and wine above 40 shekels of silver. Yea, even their servants labored over the people. But so did not I, because of the fear of God. Yea, also I set the hand to the work of this wall, neither bought we any land, and all my servants were gathered thither unto the work. Moreover, there were many at my table. Moreover, there were at my table of the Judites, the rulers, 150 men, besides those that came unto us from among the nations that were round about us.
So what Nehemiah is saying here, and this is just his dissertation as part of this book, he's saying that as the time that he was governor of Judah, he didn't take anything from the people. Even though governors had their allotted salaries, he was saying that he didn't accept that salary. He wanted to make sure that the people were taken care of. It's like when Bloomberg was mayor of New York City. He already had money that extended before he became mayor. I believe that he just took a salary, because he had to take a salary. I believe his salary was $1 a year.
$1.
I believe it was $1 a year that he took as a salary as being made, because he was making money for so many places that he didn't want to show that, I'm still taking money from the people as well. Right. He just wanted to show that he was taking care of the people and not taking from the people. So he didn't accept that salary. So that's what Nehemiah is basically saying, that even he was governor, but he didn't accept any salary. He wasn't buying people, he wasn't letting people loan him money or anything like that. He wanted to make sure everybody was taken care of so that they could focus their attention on doing the work. That's basically, as a leader, that's all he wanted to make sure, that the people were focused on God first and doing their job on earth. Continue.
18. Now that which was prepared for one day was 1 ox, 6 choice sheep, also fowls were prepared for me. And once in 10 days, store of all sorts of wine. Yet for all this I demanded not the bread of the governor.
Because he was allotted this every day or every 10 days. He was allotted this all the time. But he's saying that he didn't accept any of it. He basically made sure that the people were taken care of. And then this is his prayer to God.
Because the service was heavy upon this people. Remember unto me, O my God, for good, all that I have done for this people.
So this is where we're supposed to stop. I don't know if we could do question and answer, because we have plenty of time, or if Chief Uziel is actually watching and he doesn't mind losing one of his chapters for next week, that could be done as well. So Chief Mekobadi said he doesn't think Chief Uziel is going to mind losing, because I believe he's supposed to do 6, 7, and 8 next week. So and we're going to at least listen to a chief man here, and he says take 6. Because we could take some questions, but there were some questions that were asked during the break that I don't want to answer. From Guevara leukemia specifically. I'm just talking about Guevara leukemia specifically, not just from people out there can have questions and we'll answer those questions. It was just her questions during the break that But sometimes no answer is a good answer. Yeah. Because a lot of times people make up answers.
Right.
So that's what happened during the break. There were some questions that there were just no answers to. So that's what it was. Not that I didn't want to answer them. There were just no answers to them. So, and sometimes, like I said, once again, that's good. If you see, the problem is when people start making up answers.
Right.
Because she started talking about, I'm going to text this person. I'm not going to name. I'm going to text this person. They're going to make up an answer.
Right.
Hey, no names. And yes, they will make up an answer. But
Straight out the keeper.
Chapter 6. And we probably still going to have time anyway.
Now it came to pass when it was reported that Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem,
to our favorite
the
people,
Arabian, and unto the rest of our enemies, that I had built the wall, and that there was no breach left therein, though even unto that time I had not set up the doors and the gate. So the walls were rebuilt. So that burnt look of the walls was gone. All he didn't do at this time was put up the gates. But the walls were rebuilt. Jerusalem's looking pretty. Everybody's happy. Once again, once progress is being done, people will join in, and people will feel good about working. Once you set a goal, people will join in. That's just another message that we learn from this. Right. Pray to God for everything and make progress. Have a project that everybody can join in on and feel proud about. Because now when people see Jerusalem, even though there are people living outside, because we're going to see within this chapter and the next chapter that children of Israel are still going to be living around Jerusalem, but once they see that city, it's going to look, they're just going to feel proud. And they're going to feel proud and happy that even their hands were in on that work. Even the people that didn't do anything are going to feel happy anyway. Right. But you don't have to worry about people that didn't put their hands to the work. Just do your job. And don't worry about looking around to who's not doing what. Right. Just do what God inspired you to do. If God inspired you to do something, then you do it. Don't worry about who's not doing it, because God put that within you. Continue. That Sanballat and Geshem said unto me, saying, Come, let us meet together in one of the villages in the plain of Ono.
And once again, we're not going to get too much of that, of who they really are in this chapter, but they have so much clout that they could call Nehemiah, and they're telling him, they were so angry that the walls were rebuilt, the mocking didn't work, the threat didn't work. Now they're saying, let's just go hang out. That's what they said. Let's just go hang out somewhere. This is Nehemiah's response.
But they sought to do me mischief, and I sent messengers unto them, saying, I'm doing a great work so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease?
So every hangout is not time to hang out.
Right.
When you got work to do, focus on the work. People may call you to hang out just to stop you from doing your work.
Right.
And he found that they just wanted to call him to do some mischief to anyway. Because they realized if they could call it, they couldn't get in the city, but they have so much clout with Judah that they could send messages to him, and he's going to think nothing of it. But Nehemiah already knew what the deal was.
Yeah.
He already knew that, they were capping, that it wasn't just a hangout. That he was calling them out to do him mischief. In other words, they were going to murder him. So he told them in response, I don't got time to hang out right now.
Busy.
So when your people is calling you to do something,
Set up.
you're busy. If you're in school, focus on school. You can hang out when you're 35.
Yep.
Graduate from school first.
Yep.
Get your master's, you got time. When you're 35, you're gonna have so much strength and energy. Mm-hmm. You're not gonna miss much. Focus on your work. Don't let anybody stop you. That's why his response was that. Continue.
Verse 3 again. And I sent messengers unto them, saying, I'm doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease, while I yet leave it, and come down to you? And they sent unto me 4 times after this
They
sort.
they kept trying. Let's go to this party. Let's hang out.
Message.
Let's get a drink. 4 or 5 times they trying to, you got no time off? Every Shabbat, you can't, every Shabbat?
Everyone?
They say, let's just hang out. They got girls over here. They got, we got this, we got that. It's gonna be, it's a lituation over here.
Right.
You 4 or 5 times they calling him.
Yeah.
And he says, nah, I got work to do. That's right. The work is between him and God. He can't stop this work for anybody else. He ain't got time to hang out.
Nope.
Continue.
And I answered them after the same manner. Verse 5. Then sent Sanballat his servant unto me in like manner to the 5th time with an open letter in his hand, wherein was written, It is reported amongst the nations, and Geshem saith it, that thou and the Judites think to rebel, for which cause thou buildest the wall, and thou wouldst be their king, even according to these words.
So after that, now there's another threat. You didn't want to have a little power with us? We're going to tell the king. We're going to tell the king what you're doing here, that you just came to build this wall so you could be king of Judah. So what you going to do now? They gave him a letter. This is we're going to tell you, this is your man, Artaxerxes. This is what we're going to tell him, that you left him in order to become a king. So what you think is going to happen to you if you don't come talk to us? But this is what Nehemiah does.
Thou hast also appointed prophets to proclaim of thee at Jerusalem, saying, There is a king in Yehuda. And now shall it be reported to the king according to these words. Come now, therefore, and let us take counsel together.
So either you're going to come and talk to us peacefully, or we're going to tell the king what your intentions are. Even though they're going to that's not what Nehemiah's intentions were. But they're saying either you talk to us, or you're going to end up talking to the king. Because we're going to tell the king that you rebuild this wall so you can have prophets here and people are going to install you as king. And you can't, that's why we went into that.
Right.
You can't have a king under a king. It was good enough that you were a governor, but now you want to become a king? Artaxerxes is not going to like that. He ain't going to like that. he ain't going to like that. Like in the movie, he ain't gonna like that. He gonna eat his banana, yeah. that's what sound. He ain't gonna like. I'm gonna drop a dime. Eating a banana. I'm gonna drop a dime. I ain't like that. Continue. Some of they are too young for that movie, Belly.
Verse 8. Then I sent unto him, saying, There are no such things done as thou sayest, but thou feignest them out of thy own heart. For they all would have us afraid, saying, Their hand shall be weakened from the work, that it may not be done.
Because they still got the gates to put up. The walls is nice. We still got a gate to do. We got no time to hang out. You could threaten me with the king stuff. We got to put these gates up. Continue.
But now strengthen thou my hands. As for me, I went to the house of Shemaiah the son of Deliah, the son of Mechetabel, who was shut up, and he said, let us meet together in the house of God within the temple, and let us shut the door of the temple, for they will come to slay thee. Yea, in the night will they come to slay thee.
So he received the information that because you don't want to go hang out with them, the threat didn't work. He's saying, just go to the house of God and lock yourself in there. He said, he's basically saying, we're going to still be out here but you're the focus of their attention right now. So we want to make sure that nothing happens to you. Because if they take you out, then the people's going to become disenchanted or disheartened. And we don't want this work to stop. We still have these gates to put up. So this is what they're telling Nehemiah, just hide yourself. It's just like with the time of King David, when his foot slipped, they said, we can't have the light of Israel being put out. So he said, we got to protect you at all costs. We know what the threats that are coming against you. We got to protect you at all costs because it's because of you coming here that everybody we got our houses back. We got houses back. We got vineyards. Our wives are happy once again. Yeah. We've been building these walls. We can't have it because if you go out, these rulers they're going to go back. These Judite rulers, they're going to go back to what they were doing before. We need you here. Continue.
And I said, should such a man as I flee? And who is there that being such as I could go into the temple and live? I will not go in.
He's saying, I'm not a priest. I'm not a high priest. Right. I'm not going in the temple because somebody outside is threatening me. He said, I'm not running from people. He's saying, I got that connection with, we don't read God speaking directly, but he's saying, God got me. Everything's been working out so far. Right. He's not going to be stupid and just go outside the city and just do something stupid. But he's saying, I'm not going to also go in a place where I'm not supposed to be either.
Right.
The house of God is for the priests, and then the high priest goes into the inner chain. He said, I'm not even going to those. He knows the law to an extent.
Right.
There's holy things and there's common areas. He said, I'm not running because to profane the house of God because of somebody else. So always keep your holiness, no matter what. These are a lot of messages that we can get from this today. Continue.
12. And I discerned, and lo, God had not sent him, for he pronounced this prophecy against me, whereas Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. For this cause was he hired, that I should be afraid, and to do so and sin
against God,
that they might have a matter for an evil report, that they might taunt me.
These two guys they trying everything.
Wow.
Because it's just like the counsel that Balaam gave to Balak. He said, we can't curse them, but if you get them to sin against God, God will turn against them. So these Israelites were confederate with Sanballat and Tobiah. We're going to see a lot of confederation between Sanballat and Tobiah as we get throughout these chapters. Once again, stay tuned because you're going to realize how important these two are for Yisrael. How they have so much clout that they can send messages back and forth and letters and all this stuff. So they had their own people on the inside trying to encourage Nehemiah to go inside the house of God where he's not supposed to go, and knowing that he would sin against God and somehow God would take his life because of that. Yeah, basically. Continue.
14. Remember, O my God, Tobiah and Sanballat, according to these their words, and also the prophetess Noadiah, and the rest of the prophets that would have me put in fear.
So these are just false prophets. But they were people that were known as prophets to the people. They were close to Sanballat and Tobiah, so they figured that if you tell Nehemiah to go into the house to hide from us, he would go in the house. But then that was them seeking occasion between God and Nehemiah. Continue.
So the wall was finished in the 20th and 5th day of the month, Elul, in the 50th and 2 days.
So it took them, as it basically says here, it took them 52 days to complete the wall. Less than 2 months. So from the time that Nehemiah got there and then the work got started, 52 days. That's enduring mocking,
right?
Enduring threats, and during hangouts, and during ghosting against God? That I don't know. So you keep asking questions that the question was, you could probably Google that. The question was how high were the walls? But they were very, I mean, the city is big itself, and the walls would be high, and feet out, I don't know. But it took them 52 days to repair the walls. Remember, this was a repair job. So the walls were burnt. There was a lot of rubbish, so they had to clear rubbish out, do a lot of patchwork, take care of the breaches and things like that. So it took them 52 days. So what we read here within these six chapters, well, not really 6 chapters, from chapter 2 actually, took place within 52 days. No, this is when the Babylonians came in, when Nebuchadnezzar came in, when he personally didn't come in, but he sent his army to siege Jerusalem, and then eventually they made a breach in the walls. This was when Zedekiah was king of Israel, and he wasn't a good king either. And as a result of him turning against God in various ways, he was the one that God used to make an example of. And the Babylonians came in. Jeremiah warned them plenty of times. They threw Jeremiah in prison, and Jeremiah ended up living, getting taken out of prison. But so that guy had his eyes put out, and he got taken to Babylon. But the Babylonians, they burnt the city. They burnt the wall. So the city was looking in that state from the time that the Babylonian Empire came in there, which was again about 587 BCE. Up until now, you're talking about 546. So 140 years, this was looking like this. And that's why Nehemiah felt sad when he heard about it, because he knew people went back from that exile, but they didn't rebuild the walls. And what we spoke about last week is that, he went there just to do his job. He didn't worry about what wasn't done prior to him. He just went there to do his job and to make sure the walls are rebuilt. So we spoke about that last week. Don't complain about the work that wasn't done before you. Pick up the baton and continue on. Yep. So that's what took place, from the time that the Babylonians burnt the city up until now. But it took them 52 days in order to do that. And once again, that's just them being strong and making that progress that we spoke about last week. Continue.
And it came to pass when all our enemies heard thereof, that all the nations that were round about us feared, and were much cast down in their own eyes.
Oh, and Elul is which month of the year? Which month of the year is Elul? Yeah, the 6 months. So that's next month, because we're in the 5th month now. Remember, he prayed in Kislev, which is the 9th month. He got leave to go in Abib, even though it said Nisan. Then that's when he went there. And then he went to the inspection. So once again, it took place, the walls itself got built in 52 days, but this process took 6 months of him leaving from the kingdom. He had to travel. He didn't have a plane. So he had to travel, as mentioned. He traveled on some animal. It didn't say specifically what animal. It was either donkey, horse, or whatever. But he traveled on an animal going from Susa, which is the capital of Persia, going down into Jerusalem. So that took some time by itself. But once again, this entire thing just took 6 months. That's just being focused. So just think about your lives. You want a job, you want to finish school. Just stay focused, and it'll be over before you even know it. There's people on jobs for 25 years, as just mentioned, and they're ready to retire right now. But that 25 years went by so fast because you stayed focused on your job. Think about what we can do for Israel overall. If we have a project that we can start, that we could come together and agree on, think about how much can be done if we stay focused. 52 days to rebuild the walls of a city. Within, once again, a 6 months time of just planning and everything. Imagine what we can do in 6 months if we put our mind to it and not let haters, antagonists, or anybody mock us, threaten us, or cause us to sin against God. So none of those Friday night hanging out. Right. You can say, I've been keeping Shabbat for 10 years, but that one time could be your last time. Just like that one time he went into the house of God thinking he's running from somebody else, that would have been it for him. So don't let anybody cause you to sin against God. This book of Nehemiah is going to read it. We're going to get into a lot of names and a lot of genealogy even as we continue on. And we read about a lot of names of people that did work. But there's a lot of messages that can be obtained from this book that we're reading right here. And the main message is stay, as Moradina would say, stay prayed up. Praying is your defense. It's your main defense against anything. And look out for those signs that the Most High gives you when you pray. Sometimes the answer is no. We pray for some things that we think that because we want something, that we're supposed to get it because we pray. Sometimes the answer is no. So we thank God for the doors he opens as well as the doors that he closes. And when those doors get closed, don't worry about that. Because God has another door open for you. The Price is Right, they had many doors.
Oh, yeah.
You had to pick the right door.
That's right.
Doom, 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 doom. Continue.
Moreover, in those days, the nobles of Yehuda sent many letters to Tobiah.
And why are they doing that?
And the letters of Tobiah came unto them. But there were many in Yehuda sworn unto him, because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Arra.
So we're going to see, now we see the connection. He's well connected. So he had some people on the inside as well, because not all of the nobles was down with everything that was happening.
Right.
Not all the nobles were down with the wall being rebuilt. Not all the nobles were down with Nehemiah coming in and taking their jobs. Not everybody was down with Nehemiah coming and restoring all these houses, vineyards, and olive yards to the people.
Right.
These were people of high position. These were princes of the Judites that were, for lack of a better term, no, we'll find a better term, confederate with Sanballat and Tobiah due to marriage. So it's no strange thing that you would have an Ammonite by the name of Tobiah. Because we read in the time of Ezra, and we'll read about again towards the end of Nehemiah, Israelites were marrying foreigners. Mm-hmm. And then you have people speaking what we know today as Hebrew. They call it the language of the Judites, and speaking another language. So that's how Sanballat and Tobiah was so powerful, because they were well connected with a lot of the nobles, and they made sure that the nobles were taken care of, because that was their gap between the nobles and the kings of Persia. Prior to that, the Medes. Prior to that, Babylon. Continue.
And his son, Yehochanan, had taken the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, to wife. Also they spoke of his good deeds before me and reported my words to him. And
just to clear that, because we spoke about before that, but what he's saying, what was just read, is that these nobles are speaking highly of Sanballat and Tobiah still. Even though they mocked Nehemiah, threatened, did all that stuff, they were speaking highly of Sanballat and Tobiah, like, nah, these are good guys.
What?
These are guys that took care of us when you wasn't here. Whatever it was that they were, and they were still corresponding with Sanballat and Tobiah during this entire 6 months process. So don't work, every Israelite is not on your side.
Say what?
You got to find the people that's going to work with you, and beyond that, work with God. Continue.
And Tobiah sent letters to put me in fear.
Hallelujah. That's it. So we'll leave, as Chief Mekabadi said, chapters 7 and 8 for Chief Uziel to go over next week. And he's going to have a lot of names to read in chapter 7. But he'll be okay. So once again, the message that we learned is stay prayed up. Don't let anybody threaten you, and defend yourself. Giving all praise and honor to Jehovah God. Thank Him for our lives. Thank Him for strength, for good health, for all He has done for us. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Thank you, Most High God, for our brother Chief.